it's an open series that is open to everyone. The organizers are Maya Adina. She's the head of the research group Information, Incentives and Inequality at the WZB, and professor for applied microeconomics at TU Berlin. I'm the co-head of the research unit Environment and Resources at RWI, Leibniz-Institut for Economic Research. I'm the head of the research group Prosocial Behavior here at RWI, and I have a professorship for behavioral and environmental economics at the University Bochum. And yeah, first of all, what the seminar is and why we're doing it. So the background is the ideas for the seminar was developed within the Prosocial project, which I will briefly explain on the 2 next slides. With the seminar, we try to foster exchange between researchers studying prosocial behavior, obviously. And the format is that we have presentations each second Tuesday of each month from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. Central European Time. We have normally a 5-minute introduction. Today it could be a bit longer. Then a 40-minute presentation that is possibly recorded. So we try to do this. Of course, we need agreement. And then we have a 50 minutes question-answer session that is not recorded. We plan to upload the videos of the seminar series on YouTube. And on the right side, you see the list of speakers for 2026. So we have all speakers already confirmed. There's a summer break in July and August. The rest will be, as I said, each second Tuesday of each month. And the next one will be Roland Benabou from Princeton University in February. Briefly, what is the Prosocial project about? It's the longer title is Stimulating Prosocial Behavior. It is funded by Leibniz Cooperative Excellence Program from last year to 2027. The funding is around €1 million, a little bit less. I'm the speaker, so if you have any questions, recommendation, and so on, please reach out. The goal of the project is the identification and testing of scalable measures that motivate people to engage in various forms of prosocial behavior. So donating money, organs, or blood, volunteering, or environmentally friendly behavior. We use a variety of methods from umbrella review, so a review of reviews, to economic theoretical models, survey experiments, and coordinated field experiments with a couple of practice partners from university hospitals to, for example, World Hunger Help and so on. So charity organizations, that is in the next years. So, and here's the group of principal investigators, Maya and Steffen from WZB, Andreas Lange from the University of Hamburg, me, Isabel Tivan, Igor Grossmann, and Nathalie Sebans, who are psychologists, Linus Matov from Potsdam Institute for Climate Research, Lorenz Goethe from the National University of Singapore, Stefania Innocenti from the University of Oxford, and Redi Beckers from Freie Universität Amsterdam, and René is a sociologist. And so you see, we are behavioral economists that have worked on different fields, with some with the focus on environmental economics, some on blood spending, some on charitable giving, etc. And our colleagues from psychology and sociology that also worked on prosocial behavior or collective action, etc. The group will also try to participate. Of course, we cannot promise that everyone will always be here, but in general, we are all very interested. And the series, it's very similar to the project. It has also a focus on economics, behavioral economics, but we also have interdisciplinary speakers. And also Nathalie Sebans and René Beckers will also be two of the speakers for this year. Okay, then I hand over to Maya.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm very glad to welcome Nicola Lacetera today, who recently moved to Europe, which makes us actually very happy to have such a great researcher without not that many hours of flight. So he recently joined University of Bologna. And before that, basically, he earned his PhD at MIT and held a position for a long time at the University of Toronto. And he has an outstanding publication record with articles in top journals, including the American Economic Review and, for example, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. His research focuses on the ethical and social support of markets, the motivations for altruistic behavior, and topics in behavioral and organizational economics. Now, with our specific focus of our consortium, we especially value Nicola's expertise across different domains of prosocial behavior and specifically blood donations and organ donations. And given that, I would like to mention two of his outstanding papers, and as an example, that definitely, have motivated some of our research in the past. So one of them is a highly cited paper on blood donations called Will There Be Blood, which was published in American Economic Journal Economic Policy in 2012. And in this paper, he uses a large-scale field experiment with data from the American Red Cross, showing that financial incentives substantially increase blood donations, but importantly without reducing blood quality or safety. And also this paper finds that incentives shift donations across time and space. So they affect basically when and where people donate. But in this case, he finds that they do not affect who donates. Now, another paper from a different domain on organ donations is Paying for Kidneys, a paper that was published in American Economic Review in 2019. So in this paper, Nicola and his co-authors study public attitudes toward compensating kidney donors. In this paper, he combines a randomized survey with an incentivized choice experiment and shows that preferences are strongly shaped by moral concerns, but can change when the potential gains in transplants are sufficiently large. Now, today, Nicola will present a new project that I'm very much looking forward to. And the title is Incentives and Prosocial Discomfort, a Laboratory Experiment. Now, Mark, can you change the slide, please? Before I basically hand over to Nicola, I just would like to give you a quick note regarding asking questions during the presentation. So we would like to ask you to write in the chat if something is unclear during the talk. And then Mark and myself will moderate and ask Nicola to clarify. And please hold other comments or questions until the Q&A after the presentation. And now, without further ado, please welcome Nicola Lacetera. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for inviting me. Congratulations on this overall agenda and project and a seminar series you guys put together, which present excluded is quite excellent. So thank you so much. So let me move to my slides. If I can find them. Yep. All right. Can you see my screen? Great. Okay. So I guess I'll get started. So this, as was mentioned, is a project which is called Incentive and Prosocial Discomfort. This is together with a relatively large teams that includes bioengineers, ethicists, and economists as well. That's Mario Machis, who's been my long time co-author and friends, first of all, and some of his colleagues at Johns Hopkins University, and also Ray Stewart, who was and Joe Galaro, where they were also at JHU before moving somewhere else. So, the motivation for this kind of paper, it's not that big of a deal in this audience. I shouldn't convince anyone that, you know, society and many organizations rely on the work, participation, contribution of volunteers to provide a number of different services, or even let's call them products, including body parts like blood donors, plasma donors, marrow donors, but also, people cleaning beaches or assisting children or the elderly, uh, firefighters, mentors, and tutors, and so on. These are all activities that, at least in part, are done voluntarily, so without any pay. These are activities that require time, effort, so costs, as we call them, and also to some extent, some level, some more, some less of discomfort, and yet people uh, people engage in them. Not only do they engage them, but there is also um, some sort of positive view, sort of positive recognition of these activities. When I was actually impressed when I took my citizenship test to become also a Canadian. They give you a book to read about what it means to be Canadian, the history of Canada, institutions, and so on. But I really was impressed by one of the first pages, which is about citizenship responsibility. So, Canada is, free country. We have many rights, but hey, you should consider some responsibility. And you can think about the obvious ones like obeying the law, but also among them, there is helping others in the community. So volunteering is among one of the responsibilities that we as citizens have in exchange, among other things, of living in a free and quite prosperous society. So this is something that really is at the core of society, holds society together, and so on. And this all the more makes your endeavor with your project really, really worthwhile. At the same time, and that's what it makes the question also interesting from an economic point of view, not only an economic point of view, of course, is that most of the times, oftentimes, in the global north and even more in the global south, when the problem might become even more pressing, there is a shortage of supply of a number of activities that, at least again, to some extent, comes from volunteers. And so the question is how to motivate more volunteer work. And again, from an economics point of view, we're pretty dry and dismal, as we know. And so, there are costs, there are benefits. People might enjoy doing these things. They feel good with themselves. They receive some social recognition and so on. But this is costly, okay, in terms of efforts and time, as I said, pain, discomfort, and so on. But that might not be enough, those benefits to compensate this kind of cost. So why don't not adding to these intrinsic kind of motivations, as we call it, some extrinsic rewards? Okay, some form of compensation or private returns. So sort of the econ, to use Dick Taylor's terminology in us would say, okay, sure, the supply, when we have both intrinsic and extrinsic incentive, is definitely gonna be higher, be above the supply, when we only rely on intrinsic motivation. And so overall supply would go up if we provide this kind of incentives. But, perhaps intuitively, perhaps through personal experience, the sort of rest of the world would say, no, extrinsic motivation, extrinsic incentives, or material rewards should have nothing to do with certain domains, certain activities. And why? I didn't want to put too many sites here because the literature is pretty large, and also because you guys know it just as well as I do. I'm actually probably better because I'm getting old, and so I didn't put any quotes. So that doesn't mean that this is not coming from very thought through research, but people have been thinking and talking and finding evidence about motivation or crowding out. So for several reasons, it might be that adding material incentives actually reduces the sort of intrinsic component. It might be because having both kind of incentives provides big signals to society about our real intentions, but even to ourselves. This is the work of Roland Benabou with Jean Tirole. You will listen from Roland next month. It can be because of over justification. So if, for example, we are offered some compensation at time t, then we expect this compensation to be there for the remaining time in the future. And if it's not, then we might actually reduce our supply even below the level we had before, even before we had some sort of compensation. There may be, and this is perhaps the least explored motivation, that Richard Titmuss in his book in 1971 about, against, which was against providing incentives to blood donors. The motivation that I found more interesting is this idea that providing these kind of incentives might overall change the social fabric about what values we abide by, and therefore lead to overall, sort of at the macro level, to lower supply, not just at the individual level. Just as there has been a development of these different theories, especially in more recent times, let's say over the past 20 years, there has been increasing empirical work to test for this kind of effects, driven by this kind of theories. And overall, the evidence, I think it's safe to say, although not very scientific, it's a little bit over the place. We have some work. You guys were kindly citing my work on blood donation, Lorenz's work also, and there is work in other environments in our context. And the evidence, sometimes provides support to the idea that adding this extrinsic incentive actually increases supply. In other cases, there is a null effect, even negative in a minority of cases, I have to say. But there isn't a consensus, neither at the theoretical level nor at the empirical level. And this should not be too surprising, to be honest, because, as I said, there are so many environments, so many contexts where people provide volunteer activities and, engage in prosocial behavior, that it's hard to sort of have two equal settings. And so it's inevitable that we might find some differences. There are different types of incentives that have been provided. Lawrence work consider, lottery tickets, cholesterol test or health test. We consider different types of incentive items like T-shirts and caps, and also gift cards. It could be direct cash. it could be a day off work, which we studied in the case of the Italian blood donation system and so on. It could be social recognition, pins and mentions in newspaper and so on. So, they're very different among each other. And so it's hard to have a sort of a unified empirical consensus or theory about it. The activities that we consider vary both in terms of course, their content, the underlying social values. Some are more relevant to society, some less. Some are more socially sanctioned positively, some less. The interaction itself between private rewards and, for example, the relevance, the social relevance of an activity is hard to study. Tons of institutional details, dynamic aspects, and so on. So inevitably, we are bound to find different effects. And essentially, one point that I want to make is that context definitely matter. One great progress over the last, again, 20-25 years is the sort of growth of field studies, both through observational data and experimental data, field experiments, survey experiments, randomized control trials, and so on, and which have made the evidence, whatever the direction of it, quite credible overall, always falsifiable. But there has been a great progress on the empirical level. But of course, the limitation is that each context is specific, so it's hard to sort of make inferences across context. I myself and my co-authors have been mostly working in the field or with historical data, but this time we thought, we might go the opposite way. Typically, you start with a lab study and then you move it to the field. We wanted to do the opposite for once, which was, to go back to the lab and to try and define a sort of an artifactual, inevitably settings that would allow us, however, to isolate and compare the different effects that intrinsic motivations, the social value of an activity, and monetary returns and different costs of that activity might have, and how they interact with each other. So we set up a study where we vary the material rewards, so the monetary incentives, cash incentives, to the participants, but also we vary the charitable benefits that the activity the participant will perform produce. So individuals will incur into some discomfort, I will tell you in a moment, and if they do, there will be a charitable donation made to a charity of their choice, and each donation would be of different amounts. So we sort of exogenously vary or control the variation of the social return, and we also vary monetary incentive as well as the cost, or we are able to control for the cost of the activity and to assess the effect of monetary incentive and charitable benefit. Of course, it's a lab experiment, so the activity is not sort of a real volunteering activity, but we try to sort of create this artifactual activity that would include explicitly some physical discomfort as a way to mimic or refer to those activities that actually require physical effort, from those with actual pain, like donating blood or marrow plasma, to sort of actual physical effort, as those that I mentioned before. Is everything clear so far? Any clarification that you might wanna? Everything's good? All right, thank you. Okay, so let me tell you what we did. So So this is an experiment that took place at Johns Hopkins University at the Johns Hopkins University Motion Analysis Lab in the Center for Motion Studies, which is a collaboration between the School of Medicine and the engineering school. It was a length of about 2 hours with a $15 participation fees. We had 33 participants. This is a within study with a between component, but the core of the study is within subject component. And let me tell you what the various procedure, the sort of sequence of the procedure was. So the activity we offer the subject to incur into is to receive a little electrical stimulation. Okay. So that's one of the reasons why this study, like others using this kind of stimulus, are relatively small in terms of number of subjects, because they require individual calibration and certain instrumentation and time and so on. Could have we done it bigger for sure, but again, this is a little different from the typical sort of lab experiment where people are in front of computer, for example. And one aspect that requires time and human power or manpower, as they used to say, is that you need to calibrate it at the individual level. So what we did is we had each individual to receive in a trial phase this electric stimulation, and to rate different stimulation according to how intense it was for them, from 0, which was I cannot feel it at all, to 7, I will never go through this again, which could be different levels in terms of whatever unit of analysis you wanna intensity and so on you wanna use across individual. It could be stronger for me, lower for Maya, vice versa, and so on. But they had to put it on a scale to 1 to 7. And we set the 7 for each individual, actually 5, not 7, sorry, to be 100. So that was our index, and 20 to be the lowest level they could feel. Exactly. And from then on, we created this sort of linear scale in increments of 20. So we defined sort of the lowest perceivable 10, and then from that, we did a little linear interpolation to be more precise. And so we consider, what we offered each individual is to receive stimulations of 20 units, 40 units, 60 units, 80 units, or 100 units. And again, this is, let's say, subjective or individual specific, what a unit or 20 units mean. Okay. And so this was sort of the association fix for each individual. We would have these different levels. Okay. And then what we call the choice phase is actually the real sort of the actual experiment. So there were 2 phases of the experiment. Essentially, in each phase, people were offered to receive this electric stimulation in each of the 5 levels: 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100, in random order. In one of the phase, for each of the stimulations, so there, you have to multiply the number of offers here. We would pledge a donation to an organization among a list. I don't think I have the list here. Sorry, it's in the paper. At the choice of the subject. So, for example, we would tell the subject, are you willing to receive a 40 units electric stimulation in exchange for us to donate either 4, 8, 12, 16, or $20 to a particular charity, say United Way, for example. And this was randomized as well. So there was cross randomization across the shocks and the amounts of full cross randomization. So one of the phases, which we call unpaid donor phase or unpaid phase, is a phase in which there is no monetary return to the participants. Okay, so we offer them to receive the shock in exchange for a donation of different amounts according to the particular offer made to an organization of their choice. In a separate phase, and individuals were randomly assigned to, not everybody would experience both phases, sorry, but the order in which they were exposed to each phase was random between subjects. In the paid donor phase, as the name sort of reveals, in addition to a donation to charity of the same levels of the other, including zero, I should have mentioned, individuals would also receive a payment which would go from zero. So even the paid phase had an unpaid sub component, if you want, or two for $6, $8, or $10. Okay. And for each phase, we would randomly select one of the offer we made to each individuals, and if sort of a strategy method kind of thing, if that individual had accepted to receive that offer, then that would be implemented, and the payment would be made if the individual decided to incur in the shock. If the individual did not, then nothing would happen, of course. Okay. And so basically, you choose a particular trial. This is an example. If you accepted and you receive the stimulation, and if you were if that was selected, then you would receive the shock. Okay. Does it make sense? Okay. All right. So what do we have? Eventually, we retained 30 participants. 3 needed to be excluded for different reasons. So if you think about the unpaid phase, there are 5 shock levels times 6 charity dollar amounts. So that makes 30 choices for each individual. Multiply by 6, in addition, payment amounts in the paid phase, and then you have 180 choices in the paid phase. So for each individual, we have 210, if you want, hypothetical choices, but incentivized in the sense that one of them would be actually one per phase, so 2 of them would be implemented. Okay. So as much as the sample is small, it was well balanced among gender. We had some variation in the ethnicity of the participants. The average age, I should have reported, is 24 years and a half. And there was also balance between being exposed to the paid phase first or the unpaid phase first. Okay. All right. So I'll move to our findings. I will present just some figures. I'm more of a visual, not learner, but presenter for sure. I don't want to show tables as much as I can. So first of all, I'm going to show you the overall acceptance rate. So for each combination of the various different factors, element of the offer, what was the percentage of participants who accepted to receive the stimulation. And so I'm presenting it in a heat map. So redder or darker red colors mean higher acceptance rates. So this is overall across both phases, all levels of monetary rewards, and these are expressed in terms of combination of donation amounts. So if you want the social value of the activity, and the cost, sort of the physical cost of the activity. So overall, we see something we would expect. So higher response rates, very close to 100%. The lower the cost, the higher the social benefit of incurring that particular shock. So this is not that surprising. It's interesting to distinguishing between the two phases. So remember, in the unpaid phase, there was no mention of any benefits, any private benefit, and people would do this, if at all, only for sort of the social impact of it. So not surprisingly, if the social impact, the donation amount was zero, so this is sort of a sanity check, people would not accept the stimulation. I think only one person did, maybe, I don't know, out of curiosity, I don't know. Whereas you still see, higher participation rates for higher donation amounts. But as you can already see by, looking at the overall and the paid phase, there seemed to be a higher willingness to accept the electric stimulation given a certain social return, also for higher shock intensity in the unpaid phase. And you don't see that in the paid phase. Okay, so if you look at the colors, things become a little lighter, especially for higher costs. Again, so in some sense, this is telling us that when you add some monetary payment, people are a little less likely to accept the elective stimulation, holding the donation amount constant. So taken in the aggregate, this might imply that actually adding extrinsic rewards might actually reduce the willingness to incur in certain particularly sort of costly physical discomfort. But again, remember that there were different levels of pay. So, in order to exploit the full nature and structure of the experiment, it's interesting to look at how people responded to different payment levels. We know from other research that perhaps it's also the amount that matters. Think about Urignizis and Aldo Rustichini's work on, don't pay at all or pay enough, or pay enough or don't pay at all. So we wanted to check whether, in our design, whether this was the case. And so what we did, we compute, we sort of fully disaggregate. So we compute the response rates or the acceptance rates by donation amount, effort, and separately, and cost of effort, if you want, and separately by each pay. And so what we found is, if you look at it in this way, actually, we find that providing pay does impact positively. Just look at the colors, the average colors, if you want. So higher pay lead to higher participation for any sort of cost, shock intensity and charitable donation. So if you want social value, but where you see a big difference, so think about the zero pay. This in principle is exactly the same thing as the unpaid phase, right? Because it's zero pay and only sort of charitable contribution, but the participation, especially for larger sort of higher intensities, is much lower, if I can go back, than in the sort of unpaid phase, where there is no sort of perspective of having any private returns. And this stays especially for lower payment level. As the payment increases, especially the highest payment, 8 and 10, then you sort of have higher level of participation, just like in the unpaid phase, and also for lower donation level, if you want. And so here is where we see sort of the less than additive, if you want, impact of extrinsic benefits added to sort of intrinsic benefits as they might be measured by the social value of the activity. Okay, we can also add here.
Nicola, brief.
Yes,
you have
please.
30 minutes just for information.
30 minutes to go or 30 minutes done?
No, you are at 30 minutes, so 10 minutes more.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's good because I don't think I need more than 10 minutes. I was like, oh, what am I gonna do with 30 more minutes? So we can also look at it another way. Again, I love graphs. What can I say? That's typically my contribution to papers. We can also look at aggregating across sort of cost level, shock levels. So if you compare the unpaid phase behavior with the paid phase with zero monetary return, so sort of equivalent phases, you do see sort of a difference in response to different donation amounts. So there is more of an attenuation in the paid phase. When you add payments, of course, you see some response even when the donation amount is zero, but things are very attenuated as compared to the unpaid case. Even when we're not very close to 100% participation, you can say there is some ceiling effect. So of course you would see some tapering of the effect, but you also see it also when sort of participation rates are well below 100%. The response to higher donation amount, to higher social value is lower when there is some monetary incentive than when there is none. Okay, so there seem to be some sort of decreasing marginal impact of charitable donations when you have some monetary gain. And we can also see it in another way. So this comes from a regression analysis. If you regress essentially a binary indicator for accepting a particular offer on the charity level, on dummies for different levels of pay, and interaction of pay and charity, and control for the shock level, for the ordering of the phases, for the phase itself and the ordering. What you find is that the delta parameters, become lower and lower and get to zero. So there is a lower marginal return to increase in the charitable level, and sort of the interpolation somehow says the same thing. So our main result here is precisely that there is an effect of adding extrinsic incentives, but that effect mitigates the sort of marginal response, if you want, to the social value of the activity. So people are respond less, in terms of acceptance to activities that also have a very high social impact. Okay. And this is our main analysis based on within subject variation, the one we not only thought was the most relevant, but also we have more sort of confidence given the sample size and so on. But we also wanted to explore in our design potential order effects. So again, what I'm going to show now is more suggestive, but I think potentially interesting for future studies. So the question is it different whether people know that there can be monetary incentives and that they're not given those incentives, or then when they do something only for the sake of it, for the social benefit of it, and then we also add monetary rewards. Okay, so this is sort of going back to the unpaid phase. Okay, so we separate the picture as shown below according to whether people experience the unpaid phase before the paid phase, or when they actually experience the paid phase before and then the unpaid phase. Okay, and we don't see too much of a difference here. So when it comes to a context where people know that they won't receive any benefits, they respond similarly regardless of the ordering. As we move to the unpaid phase, to the paid phase, things are a little different actually. So this is the case where people first experienced the unpaid phase, so think of it, as donating a first time, or think about donating, knowing that there won't be any personal return. And after having made a decision about that, then they have the second phase where they're actually told, okay, in addition to that sort of social return, you will also receive some money. Okay. And here we see a lot of reds. Okay. So keep that in mind, because this is what happens when you revert the order. Okay. So again, for very high level of monetary return, perhaps not surprisingly, people overcome things, but even in that case, things are a little different. But for smaller payments, again, to be taken with, some caution and so on, but this is pretty striking. So this is pretty striking. Okay. Now I first received some payments, or at least I'm told I can receive some payments. Okay. And I'm told about all the possible combinations. Okay. Sometimes but not having been exposed to the possibility of donating just for the social value of it, I don't respond too much to it if the pay is very low or lower, okay, on the low side. Okay. So if we put things together, and we separate, by different shocks, and so this is what happens in the unpaid. So these essentially are the line graph as before, but separate according to the ordering of phases. So in the unpaid phase, and shocks, of course, with higher shock, there is a little bit less return, but there isn't much of a difference according to the ordering of the phases. And especially for lower payment amounts, when the paid phase is late, so people don't respond essentially. Okay. Yes.
Question. Below the left, it says unpaid phase. Unpaid phase first.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm just noting it now. So the gray is paid phase first.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So gray paid. Okay, lower. Okay, for this level.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. My bad. Thank you for pointing it out. It was confusing. Okay.
Mhm.
So what do we get out of this? So again, we see our main result is to have a setting where we can control all these different variations, that elements that are relevant in this kind of context. Of course, in a lab setting, we overall find evidence consistent with that less than additive interaction between monetary payments and sort of prosocial benefits, so an attenuation of the responses when we add money into the picture. This is not overall, but it depends on the level of payment. Typically, for very small payment, you see less, more of this attenuation about sort of the pro-social drive for participants. As I said, at least suggestively, it looks as though being exposed first to purely altruistic incentives provides a boost to sort of these prosocial incentives that remains, and so you have less of that attenuation effect of prosocial incentives later on, even if there is a payment. Okay. So again, some implications that different levels of personal incentives according to the context might produce different effects. Again, there could be more participation, but not additive or less than additive. And again, this also, from a practical point of view, so the sequence, or if you want, the salience you give to pro-social incentives versus monetary incentives might help in getting the best out of both type of incentives in increasing participation and willing to undertake uh, uh, this kind of activities. So this is all I have. I think I used precisely my 10 remaining minutes. So thank you so much for listening, and I'm very eager to hear your questions.